The Adventures of SweetieBelle.jpg by Dash the Stampede. Chapter 1. Doc. As the lights flickered on, followed by a few clicks and clacks, SweetieBelle.jpg opened her eyes. Well, her eyes were always open, frozen in the same cubitus-causing sadness, her mouth curled into a frown. She sat upon the floor, looking up, as though staring at the sky. With a blip, the door to Sweetie's room opened, the folder spreading her possessions wide for all to see. She would have panicked if she weren't anchored to the bottom of the folder, unable to shut it with the red X upon her far wall. She glanced up to see the same old white arrow floating across the sky. Princess.Drive's cell had reassured her little files and codes that the arrow meant no harm, and in fact governed the universe as they knew it. As the arrow grew near, SweetieBelle.jpg shivered with delight. In its grasp were two other files, her best friends. FlightlessChicken.gif, whose face repeatedly smashed into the piano she sat at, was placed to her left, while AppleBloom.png took her right. "Hey girls," SweetieBelle.jpg said, her frown betraying her cheerful tone. "Are you ready for more copy-pasting? Think we'll earn our shortcut logos today? I think we should try recycling bin diving." The piano's keys smashed together in a horrifying amalgamation of sound and speech that would have torn off Sweetie Belle's ears if they weren't so firmly stuck to her. FlightlessChicken.gif had been destroying the sound barrier and the poor piano for over a month, but the reaction was always the same, a withheld chuckle for the misfortune of others. "That's a great idea, Flats! Ooh, maybe we'll find the lost treasure of Cell!" AppleBloom.png quipped, her smile infecting the files and codes around her with an idle happiness. "I heard it's clop." "What's clop?" "I think it's the sound you make when you attach to something," Sweetie Belle guessed. "Well, I once overheard my sister Applejack.png talking about the awful and terrible pictures that Cell banished to the bin many restarts ago. Things you've never thought or dreamed of could be waiting for us." AppleBloom.png looked over to her friends, her smile giving Sweetie pause. Flightless continued to smash the piano, the keys leaving their indent upon her face, teeth starting to crack and shift. "You know your smile's creepy as Tartarus.drive tea, right?" SweetieBelle.jpg said to Bloom, who only smiled in response. Suddenly, the arrow hovered over them, before encasing the trio of files in a blue haze. "Oh, shoot! I don't want to go to school!" AppleBloom.png wailed as the arrow dragged the trio to a separate folder, Cheerilee Students' Cache, where they would be included when Cheerilee's Class.exe loaded. The arrow selected the exe, a classroom sprouting up around the trio, numerous other files and codes filling up the open space. The three took their places at the back of the class, the bottom of the script. Behind them, the walls vanished into darkness, small ones and zeros flashing in and out of their peripherals. A chime echoed out, the schoolbell.mp3 ringing for all to hear, as their teacher, Miss Cheerilee.png, materialized at the front of the class. Her voice called out to the class, bringing them to rapt attention. The only sound remaining was the constant of FlightlessChicken.gif's piano, bringing the dull monotony to a duller roar. Miss Cheerilee.png frowned, the constantly downturned lips showing obvious disapproval. The arrow blipped in and hovered over Flightless. Surrounding her in a bluish haze once more, a small bar popped up with a megaphone symbol atop it. The bar slowly decreased, FlightlessChicken.gif's getting less and less defined, before becoming just a mild tapping on the desk. Flightless tried to speak, but it came out as a tiny buzz of static, her sound levels having been lowered to 5%. Suddenly, the classroom flickered on and off, cheerily fading in and out of focus as the exe struggled to stay afloat. SweetieBelle.jpg looked about the room, her sad eyes catching the sight of one DiamondTiara.png, her pixels flailing about as though flies over trash, her face remolding itself hundreds of times in mere seconds. Her face turned to Sweetie, and she noticed the dark red letters above her head. Error, file corrupt, DiamondTiara.png, followed by another flicker. SweetieBelle.jpg pointed it out to her friends, confused. "Do you think she's sick? Maybe... Oh no! What if she has a virus?" Sweetie tried to look concerned, but her cutie-beatus gaze didn't falter. FlightlessChicken.gif staticked. "I think we should investigate. Maybe we'll earn our shortcuts then," AppleBloom.png suggested, the trio confirming the plan silently. SweetieBelle.jpg moved her papers about, folding up a blank .doc and throwing it toward DiamondTiara.png's form. Upon entering her file space, it was absorbed into Diamond's form, shrinking away as the virus ate it, slowly and surely. The classroom flickered again, the arrow beginning to slide closer and closer to the X on the ceiling as the flickers increased in frequency. SweetieBelle.jpg had lost many a good day of computing with her friends to lost data and viruses, and was not about to let them get in her way again. She sat up determined, looking about for any sort of assistance. She spied the question mark above her desk on the ceiling, inviting her to ask her questions. Pressing it with a hoof, she watched as a bubble opened before her, its words bold and clear. Type query here. Okay, how does this work again? Sweetie sat back in shock as a detailed instruction list appeared before her eyes, highlighting the features of the query box. Oh, okay. So how do we fix DiamondTR.png? Sweetie awaited the answer, the box arranging words to make a direction list. SweetieBelle.jpg gasped. If she were to save DiamondTR.png, she'd need to delete her, then find a way to reload her original specifications. Without the almighty admin spell, she couldn't change or fix a thing, and the only being responsible for it was Cell. Sweetie frowned, upset that she couldn't do a thing, until she glanced out the window and noticed the file with the fox icon sitting on the swing set. Slowly easing her way toward the door, using the breaking pathways to squirm through the flood of data, SweetieBelle.jpg took a breath of fresh air as she stepped out of Cheerilee's Classroom.exe. Making her way over toward the swing set, she looked back only to see AppleBloom.png stuck between the exe and the outside, which Cell called the desktop. She couldn't force her way through the firewall, as a part of DiamondTR.png's virus had leaked into her body, beginning to corrupt her. The desktop would prevent her access so as to not infect the rest of the files and folders out in Equestria.zip. SweetieBelle.jpg grimaced. She would be on her mission alone, without her trusty friends by her side. She wasn't afraid, though. She was a strong file. Rearing back and pressing the icon on the file's flank, the desktop disappearing as Sweetie felt herself tugged into another world. Information raced past her. Ones and zeros and .jpegs and .exes and all sorts of files flowed through the space SweetieBelle.jpg found herself in. As she glanced up, she saw a bar atop the crowd of files and codes, all racing to their destination. Sweetie was suddenly very glad she only had to travel to school. This place was huge. As she traversed the sea of data, she found herself caught by an errant file, the poor dear dragging Sweetie along the ley lines of cyberspace, before depositing her amidst a sea of files and codes, PNGs, JPEGs, and GIFs alike, all lined up to some cosmic order, the words atop the screen displaying "Ping the search engine." Sweetie's eyes bugged. She was so close. Her sister, Rarity.jpg, had mentioned the numerous times she and her friends, who were found in the Elements of Harmony folder, had rescued Cell in Equestria.zip. Now it was Sweetie's turn. Leaping over the files, she soared toward the bar, tapping it with a hoof and opening the text box. Find DiamondTR.png, Sweetie crooned to the device, the box filling as she voiced her query. She patted the magnifying glass icon, and the world around her shifted, filling her vision with hundreds of blips of pink as the screen filled with DiamondTR.png files, but none of them held the same telltale smirk and flaunting flank of her diamond. Leaping off the bar and to the side, she grabbed a hold of the vertical platform, her weight dragging it down and revealing more DiamondTR.pngs. Suddenly, in the corner of her eye, she spotted the one, her smirk bringing rage to her mind, or that telltale flank, emblazoned with her own shortcut. DiamondTR.png sat before Sweetie, surrounded by millions of other tiaras, her smirk echoing into Sweetie's soul. What do you want, blank flank? Diamond sneered, her nose turned slightly upward. I'm here to save you, Sweetie murmured, attempting to attach Diamond Tiara's essence to hers, before leaping back into the endless depths of the knowledge pool, swimming through the crowds of files, searching for the swing set she had arrived by. Diamond struggled in her grip, upset at being removed from her place. Put me down! I'm not in danger! I don't need saving! Diamond insisted, her smirk forcing itself into a frown. Yes, you do. You were corrupted in our desktop, and I journeyed to find you, so we could replace the corrupted Diamond. Sweetie struggled with the bandwidth, pressing against her like a net of steel. She forced and forced before shooting out the other side, flying out of the file's shortcut and into the side of Cheerilee's Classroom.exe. DiamondTR.png slammed into the wall next to her, coming to a rest before a small alert box hovering above her head. The box held an exclamation mark as its symbol, and its words were dire. A file with the name DiamondTiara.png already exists. Do you wish to replace it? Sweetie looked up, and smiling inside, she pressed the button highlighting the affirmative. Nothing occurred save her hoof traveling through the box entirely. Diamond sat up, rubbing her head. Stupid blank, now look what you've done. Diamond growled, reaching to hit the no option, but stopped. Why should I help you? She asked Sweetie, frowning again. You pull me through the knowledge pool, throw me in a building, and expect me to delete myself so that I can take over? Are you crazy? The schoolhouse in front of them flickered back and forth, the walls starting to fracture and reveal the inside. The script was falling apart. If she wasn't careful, she could lose all her friends and would have to wait for a reboot to see them again. Darting forward, she grabbed Diamond's hoof, forcing it into the yes option, the schoolhouse beginning to slow in its fluctuations. The alert box disappeared, followed by the click-clack of the desktop processing the delete. Cheerilee's Classroom.exe began to close, the files and codes fleeing from the building before it collapsed. The lone file within was the corrupted Diamond, who stared out at Sweetie with grim, soulless eyes as the building collapsed on itself, the script washing away the infected file as the data cache cleared. DiamondTiara.png looked back to SweetieBelle.jpg with a look of disbelief. She sat, pointing at Sweetie's flank, where a small icon now sat, a picture of an arrow above a trash bin, dragging a blackened file to it, resting on her flank. You got the bin shortcut! That's almost like being an admin! How? DiamondTiara.png froze, her mouth opening and closing repeatedly, without any words forming. Sighing, SweetieBelle.jpg lifted her over her head and carried her toward her folder, dumping Tiara's glitching form into the bin on her way. DiamondTiara.png's face disappeared into the confines of the prison of the bin, the lid closing over, and faint whispers of "How?" echoing out. Turning about, SweetieBelle.jpg spotted her friends, safely in the confines of their shared folder, FlightlessChicken.gif's face smiling as she spotted Sweetie, her volume having returned. AppleBloom.png slid over and brought SweetieBelle.jpg into a hug, dragging FlightlessChicken.gif into it as well. The sighs of the happy files were steadily drowned out by the of the piano. As the folder closed up, AppleBloom.png's voice echoed out. So what happened to DiamondTiara.png? Did you save her? SweetieBelle.jpg's reply came swift and sure. Oh, she's just searching for the lost clop files for me.